Hello and welcome to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Michelle Vignault. And with honesty and confidence and a touch of Duran Duran, Michelle shares her journey of ups and downs through a complicated life and how a special friendship helped her through the darkness to find a second chance at happiness. With the support of a best friend, Vignault discovers the tools she needs to overcome one obstacle after another until she eventually regains control of her family. Hold Back the Rain brings to light the difficult realities of life, but ultimately is the story of how inner strength and perseverance are the keys to making it through. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Michelle. And I had to look up this Duran Duran reference, which I'm familiar with Duran Duran. I think everybody listening, if you grew up in the 80s particularly, you know the song Hungry Like a Wolf. Like, who doesn't know Hungry Like a Wolf? And if you don't, you've been living under a rock. Even my youngest, she's going to be 16 here soon, knows that song. I've made sure to expose her to all types of
Uh,
genres. Johnny Cash, like so many old stuff. Yeah, but um I did not know the song Hold Back the Rain, which is the title of your book. And so I'm interested to learn more of that connection that you feel with Duran Duran and music and how that plays into the title. But um I just let's start at what brings you to Grieving Voices and how the book came to be.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Victoria. Thank you for having me and having your listeners take time to listen to my story and our conversation. I want to first commend you. You're raising a great daughter if she already knows about Duran Duran and Hungry Like the Wolf. So thank you for educating her. I've had a long love for the music, the band, the style, and over decades, their music has followed me. And I've, through difficult times, would rely on music to keep me going. And so after tackling a lot of life changes, I decided to write my story. And it was, for me, an easy inclusion of Duran Duran, the references sometimes in the book, and Hold Back the Rain. It's an uncommon song of theirs, and it has some beautiful, sweet lyrics to it. So it wasn't the original title, to be honest with you, for my book, but in the end, it was the best choice.
What does that title mean to you?
Hold Back the Rain. I think I've been given some life cards that are difficult to live with. And I feel like things come at you. Work comes at me. Life comes at me, comes out to all of us. And you want to push back. You want to be able to handle it all. But sometimes I can't. I don't. Um, and it's a little bit ironic. Hold back the rain. Who's going to stop rain?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to stop life changes? Um, so it's meaningful for me. For me.
A picture
So
that comes to my mind is, grief can be so isolating. And I think there's a lot of pictures depicting grief with rain falling, right? And someone just kind of crouched down and you feel like you're under this cloud of sadness and sorrow and like you're under the rain clouds, right? And
yes,
sometimes all
yes,
you
that
need.
cloud of grief or depression for some, or just that weight, right?
Overwhelmed. Mhm.
The overwhelming feeling and the simplicity of the rain being also cleansing and refreshing and sometimes a new start, right? Um,
but I picture someone just coming in because it can be so isolating and you feel like you're alone in it. And then sometimes someone comes along with an umbrella, or you decide, you figure out that, oh, I guess I can get my own umbrella
Mm-hmm.
and empower myself and cover myself from this pouring rain, right? Like, just, I don't know. That's the picture that comes to my mind. It's not a trying to stop or push back, but it's trying to shelter in place and um, get some solace and protection within yourself and with community and with support. And so let take us back in time to when your storm started.
Yes. Thank you. My storm happened a few years ago. Well, I take that back already. My depression is something that it's a big topic, but it's been a part of my family history for a lot of years. I grew up with a brother 9 years older named Mark, and knew at a very young age of my own, I realized that Mark had depression. Um, and so with a life journey with being his younger sister and seeing him go through ups and downs for decades. Um, and so at one point, it was just really too much for him. And so we always had an inkling that he might, um, not sure how detailed to get, but um, he had so many challenges. We just kind of had this idea that at some point Mark might not be able to handle life like the rest of us. And uh, and we can talk more about him, but he passed away in fall of 2016, and he took his life. And so my grief journey, first time ever in my early 40s, lost someone dear to me. And even though I had a life of preparation, it still was real, right? So I lost my brother and had a hard time managing my grief. I married at the time, 2 young daughters, and my husband was at the same time going through his own challenges. And he passed away 6 months after my brother. So in that short time, to lose two of your most favorite people was a lot. And so that's about when my journey began 8 years ago. 8 years ago. I became a widow March 27th. And in 8 years, sometimes I think, Victoria, I have this. I feel like I'm super mom most of the days. I work hard at my job. I know I'm a good daughter. I know I'm a good friend. But at the same time, it catches up with you. And it caught up with me completely off guard last year. And so last year I was going, going, going. Fast forward to November. Started feeling a little funny about things, just overwhelmed and stressed more than normal. And then in December, just this past December, last month, I completely crashed. And not talking car accident, I'm talking that complete overwhelmness and just a big, kind of like a slap in the face of, oh, no, 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 grief is still here. You still miss these people. You're daily affected by them not being here with me, with us. And boy, it knocked me on my feet. I probably was in bed as much as possible, slept as much as possible, didn't see it for weeks, and then woke up one day at the end of the month and realized, oh, you're not Superwoman. You cannot do it all. You do have the weight of the grief. And that was hard. That was a hard lesson last month.
Can you pinpoint to anything that provoked that?
I travel for work, and airports for some reason can be triggering for me. And the third time it's the third time this has happened. I had a work trip, came back from it, and I think the thing about airports is that I often see these families going on a vacation, or people are in their best form. They're excited, they're happy typically. And these families with the doting fathers. And even though my daughters are older, 12 and 10, but to see these dads with the little kids and helping with the diapers and doing all the dad things, airports, they remind me of what I didn't have for my daughters. And it's, yeah, I don't, yeah, it's just a strange, it was a catalyst for kind of me realizing it's 8 years. You're doing really good, Michelle, but you're still alone. We go to the restaurant, we ask for a table for 3. Oh, will there be a husband? Will there be a fourth coming? No, just the 3 of us. There's so many encounters that can happen. And it kind of built up. It really did build up.
Do you feel like you've processed a lot of your grief? And if you feel you have, what you mentioned a friend, but how has your healing process been the past 8 years?
Yes, thank you. You know, at the beginning, when I lost my brother and my husband, I'm a note taker. I should say that. I have pages here of notes as we've been talking and talked earlier. And even then, I was making lists. My husband was in the hospital. And he, pardon, I just had a minute there. Ask me your question one more time, Victoria.
What is your healing? Do you feel like you've healed a lot of your grief? And if you feel you have, what has that process looked like for you?
Thank you. I feel that the process of writing and scribbling, taking notes, making lists, I'm very much that kind of person. And at the beginning, when I lost my brother and lost my husband, I was all about lists, what was happening to my husband, Tracy, in the hospital, and who do I need to contact, and who do I need to do this and that. And so I bring this up because those lists turned into letters at the time to my best friend in Austin, Texas. And I was writing letters to Suzanne. And I love letters and mail and little things like that. And it makes me happy to send people cards and things like that. So at first I was writing some letters. Then the letters, I started writing more at night just for myself to get ideas out and get concepts out and release. And then after about a year, I realized that I was processing my grief at that time through writing. And it was just writing for myself at that point. I don't know that I'll ever be over the loss of my brother and husband and the loss of so many layers to the onion of feelings. But coping and working through it and getting through it and looking to light, writing was a surprising, more than a safety net. Writing became more of a critical mission. I had to express myself. And then in time, it became a book. And I went down that process and in the end have my book to show.
Well, what writing does is it helps us connect our head to our heart.
Mm.
It's different when you're typing, on a laptop or something, but versus ink to paper. It's the ink to paper. It's the active process of your thoughts coming through your fingertips. And I think onto paper is the process of connecting to your heart. And that's why I think writing is so powerful. It's journaling has been my thing since I was young. And writing poetry. I was writing poetry when I was in elementary. Not very good poetry, but needless to say, I was, you know, um, writing as well. I've published a book too, actually, in 2017. But I'm curious because the cover of your book is neither your brother nor your spouse, and yet that's the pain I believe you're writing about. But I, of course, know there's more to a cover of a book than meets the eye, and there's more to a griever than meets the eye, and our grief is usually cumulative, and it's cumulatively negative. And so I imagine that you had plenty of grief before your brother even passed, having had that happen in your 40s. We don't get to our 40s unscathed, and we definitely don't get beyond our 40s unscathed. So what were your grief experiences as a child, if you're open to sharing any of those? And what did you learn about grief? What were you taught about grief? Is it something that was talked about growing up?
Oh, Victoria, you're so good.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yes, I have some thought collisions going on upstairs. As a child, my experience with grief was very limited. I'm a child of the 70s, and my parents did not talk about feelings. We sat down to eat dinner, we ate it. We had a job to do, we did it. We didn't talk back. It's a very different time than today in 2025. But when my grandparents passed away on my mom's side, I was maybe under 9, maybe somewhere between 6 and 9. And mom was sad. Nothing was said too much after we had the news. And that was it. And I never felt comfortable asking questions. I never felt comfortable bringing it up. And with many things in our family, We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about things, and especially our feelings. So
Were you
we
close to your grandparents?
were a little distant of geographically from the grandparents. So I didn't have a big closeness to them. Um, I had a heartbroken a time or two and lost friends along the way due to geographic or life changes. But a true death of someone close was probably one of my best friends. Her brother died of suicide back in the 90s, and seeing how her and her family worked through their grief was probably one of the bigger lessons I've had in seeing people express, talk about it, and kind of work through that grief. What is strangely ironic about life is that it's so unpredictable, meaning when my friend's brother took his life, my parents went to that son's funeral on my behalf. 25 something years later, that same family came to my brother's funeral to support my parents. And it's just so fascinating to see how, the loss of a child is just so great. And to see my parents and their parents, it's just a fascinating thing, just the pain. And so fast forward to the cover of my book, which is a picture of myself with my two daughters, as you said, not my brother, not my not my late husband. It's a picture of my daughters and I that captures us in such a way. We took the photograph when we went to release my husband's ashes. A friend took that photograph of us. And I feel like it's so striking because in the end, who's still here are the three of us. And that image that is on the cover, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. I had no idea that I was in that moment going to have such a great responsibility. I already knew I was a parent and I had a responsibility, but I had a buddy to do parenting with, right? And in that moment, taking that photograph, it was kind of one of those life aha moments of, this is our family. This is our family. It's the three of us. Your dad's not here. He's not coming back. And it was a very, again, an aha moment. But there's a strength there. There's fear in the eyes, but there's a strength there of, I have the opportunity to improve communication in my family history, to teach the girls skills. They were 2 and 4 when their dad passed, but I had the opportunity to give them a family that communicates. And so I put us on the cover because together we're stronger. And in some ways, we can hold back that rain. We can push through.
How have you communicated with your daughters about grief? What have you found helpful? I'm sure you've done research along the way and how to support them, and what have you found helpful? And all kids are different, right? Too. I mean, I lost my dad when I was 8, um, but nobody knew what to do. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was there was no communication whatsoever, and so I'm just curious what you learned and what was helpful for you in helping supporting your daughters.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things that come to mind are simplicity, and I'll elaborate, but simplicity and trying different things. Um, so in regards to simplicity, because they were so little at the beginning, that I thought, okay, I don't want them to rely on hugging a stuffy. I don't want them to rely on seeing a TV in the background and that's their memory of. I wanted simplicity. So upstairs are our bedrooms, and there's a landing, and it's just a hallway. So we typically go to that landing to have a serious conversation of sorts, right? So that way there's no distractions, and I keep it simple. So I wouldn't typically speak with them for more than 5 or 6 minutes. And in those moments, it's being honest and me saying, giving them the information, for example, when their dad passed, remaining honest, and also telling them I'm really sad. And if I feel like crying when I'm talking with them in those moments, then I cry. Um, I want them to sometimes see that mom does have those emotions, does get sad, does get mad. I'm mad that your dad's not here to see you dance ballet at your recital. And I'm sad he's not here to go on the airplane with us to go on vacation. So I feel like me expressing different emotions over time gives them and has taught them that when my now 12-year-old has a problem with a fellow student, she is not cautious about coming to talk to me about it. She trusts that I'm going to listen and see if there's a way to course correct. And then trying things, honestly, Victoria, like years ago, we did this family group therapy where the adults would go to one side and talk about things, and then the kids would have art therapy and talk about things. Well, years later, my oldest daughter, Charlotte, she says, oh, I hated going to do that. you know, some things work and some things don't. But, at the time, I felt like it made sense to be around a group of kids that all had lost someone dear to them and talk through it. And even though she may have rolled her eyes at different points in time, I'm only trusting that trying different tools and trying different things, that it will help propel them for their womanhood, to be able to, like you mentioned earlier, have your heart work more cohesively with your mind, right?
Would you describe Charlotte as highly sensitive, empathic?
Yeah.
That is why that didn't work for her. It
Yeah.
was too sad. It was too heavy. It's too much of other people's stuff. She hasn't learned how to create this
Mm,
energetic bubble for herself, that what's theirs is theirs and what's hers is hers.
makes
If
sense.
she can learn as a highly sensitive child, empathic child, which there's a difference,
Mm,
not all highly sensitive people are empathic, but all empaths are highly sensitive. So I'm an empath who's highly sensitive. When I've started to learn about energy work and energy itself and grief and how this all tied together and looking back at my childhood, it made total sense. I required a lot of sleep. I slept a lot. The world was just too much and too heavy. My
Mm,
environment was too much and too heavy. It was chaotic. There was a lot of anger. It was fighting. It was, it was just too heavy for me. It literally weighed me down.
mm,
So the best gift that you can give her is for her to learn what's hers, what isn't hers, to tuning into her body, connecting with her body,
mm,
being in her body. That's where like dance, yoga,
mm,
um, expressive, using her, like just being in her body can create a sense of safety within herself.
That's so fantastic that you share that, because Charlotte is such a active
Peaceful.
participant with a bubble. Volleyball, soccer. She loves K-pop dancing. You're with a group, but you're honing in on yourself
Mm-hmm.
in big ways.
When it comes to emotions, that can be a little harder
Yeah.
because as an empath, you can put yourself in the shoes of other people. You're sensitive to other people's emotions. You want to help. You want your environment to be higher vibe because it helps you to feel better, right? So empaths, highly sensitive people can tend to become the caretakers, emotional caretakers of their environment, of those people around them, often at their own expense.
And then zaps
They're not
energy.
aware of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Just I'm just throwing that out there just based on what you described. Because I can
Absolutely.
relate to that, being that as a kid and not understanding it and no one having this understanding around me, right? Like my mom wasn't into personal development or anything like that. I pretty much raised myself
Mm,
emotionally, raised myself. So, but if you can help her recognize sensations or feelings in her body, like what's a yes and what's a no, and sensing the emotions of others. Well, what comes up for you when you're sitting with someone who's sad? Do you recognize that that's not yours? That you're just maybe feeling what they're feeling?
mm. I have so much to learn. And a lot of it is hands-on learning, right? It's not what I was taught.
No, we're not.
No. And on top of being raised in a family unit that didn't communicate,
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, my parents had a very loud relationship,
Mm.
and it was volatile at times. And so I grew up knowing, stay in my bubble, look a certain way, don't be too loud, don't be too quiet. So I feel like I'm now, as an only parent, I'm careful not to say single parent. That makes me very uncomfortable.
Mm.
I'm an only parent, but as an only parent, I'm also overcompensating so many days of trying to be the dad or the mom or the this and the that, and that's exhausting. Um, and
So
it's impossible.
how do you support yourself in your own energy?
I'm learning, Victoria. I'm constantly learning. And lately I'm having to remind myself, and literally remind myself, You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You're doing enough. And lately, I've also been realizing that it's very lonely because we go throughout the year, work and family and this and that. And, it gets very lonely. So I think I certainly rely on my good friendships to help me. And yeah, yeah. Not sure if that answers your question.
Are your parents still living?
They are still living. They divorced after 45 years together.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I thought at the time, I thought, why? Why at this point?
How old were they then?
You're, that was in '06 that they divorced. So next year will be 20. Um, they're in their late 80s.
Wow.
They're still in great shape for soon to be 88 and 86, I think.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Living on their own yet?
Mom is in uh not a compound, but a facility with, she has her own apartment and
Oh, like assisted living type.
yes,
There's
yeah.
people there to help out if she needs it when she needs it, but has that independence.
Yes, 100%. She loves it. She loves it. And then dad is still in his house down the street.
That's remarkable. Did either remarry?
He's had a long-standing girlfriend for a lot of years. So dad and Sandy have been together a long time and very happy. Did not marry. They had done that. Been there, done that.
How did that, how did you work through that? 45 years, like your parents, like 45 years. Like, how did you? It's so different. Like, I had a friend that
Mm,
her parents divorced when we were, 13. She was 13. Like, that's a really difficult age. And then my mom had remarried after my dad passed, and they ended up getting divorced too. But that was a blessing in disguise.
hmm
Blessing to me anyway. But
hmm
how did 45 years? Like, what? Like, was it heart? Did you feel it was heartbreaking, or
It
was it
was
like,
so disappointing
mm,
because for all that time, my brothers are 6 and 9 years older, and
so you were the youngest?
I'm the youngest, the baby girl. So lived through all the heartache, the yelling, the physical stuff, like lived through, stuffed it down. I was married to my first husband at the time, and had a call on a Sunday afternoon. And it was a phone conversation, had me on speakerphone, just had a regular Sunday conversation, call planned. And they dropped the news that they're getting a divorce. And I'm thinking, you couldn't have done it sooner,
Wow.
you know? And to be honest with you, Victoria, they're happier apart than together. Um, I can say that now. But right at the time it was very disappointing. And I think the hardest thing is that even adults can't be adults. They can't even adult themselves sometimes, meaning now I'm an only parent and I know they're older, but they've not really, the girls don't go there for sleepovers.
Right.
You know, they're not meeting me at the bus stop to get the girls. It's still a disjointed relationship.
Hmm.
There's that separation and wall, not to get too close. Um, so I mentioned that because yeah, it was disappointing. And then after 45 years of spending time together, they were so done that when I did get remarried, they had to stay separate. When I have a birth of my first child, and then the second child, and then this happens and that happens. It's like, now I have the burden of keeping them separate for the past 20 years when they were inseparable for almost 45.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also a resentment of, really, now I have to deal with this layer of the onion on top of all the other things. Yeah.
Something no one's ever really, I don't think anyone's ever mentioned in terms of divorce as adults, like when the parents divorce as adults. Like, I don't think that's something that's really talked about, as that you can feel relief, right? That they're happy and that they've, you know, gone their separate ways, because now you don't have to hear that noise. Then at the same time, well, now then, how is this my problem now to accommodate, right?
Right. And the number of times I've asked either of them, can you just move forward? Can you simply,
And they have,
and they have, but they
but have
haven't.
they? That's the thing that goes back to your statement of like, even adults don't know how to adult and be. It's when it comes to, I've talked about this before on the podcast, but like when it comes to like child grievers, um we'll say divorce in particular, and there's children involved, it's like, or even a spouse passes away, right? When my dad passed away, my grandparents, I lost my entire dad's side of the family, cousins, aunts, uncles, because the adults could not
Mm,
adult,
could not
right? And
adult.
so, yeah, I was like, I then suffered that connection because the adults couldn't adult.
Right.
And so it's like, it's no different. You can be a child and your parent can make decisions that affect you. You can be an
To
adult
this
child and your
day.
parents' choices can still affect you. It's like, do you not learn as adults? Like, do your parents not learn? Like, this is why it's so important that we sweep our own doorstep, like, and look at the past. What are the lessons? How can I move forward? How can I make this better for other people involved? That's awareness. That
Mm.
takes some self-sacrifice, right?
Self-reflection.
Self-reflection. Exactly. Like, I'm getting a little worked up just because it's like the patterns repeat. That's my point in saying this.
Yes.
Why it's so important. And that's why what you're doing in talking with your kids about grief, it stops with you. This is why education on this podcast is so important to me, that people get this message.
Mm.
Sweep your doorstep. It will impact generations.
And that gives me shivers right now because it's so true. Don't go
You're not
judge.
you Yeah, you might not see it today. That's your legacy.
Right.
Let that be your legacy, if anything. People think, oh, with your grief, like, oh, I have to write a book or I have to do this big grandiose thing. Clean up your energy, clean up your life, look at the past, learn from it, let it transform you, transmute it into let the legacy be that you become a better version of yourself and for those people in your life. That can
Right.
be your legacy.
And it's taken me, now being a widow for 8 years, it took me about 6 to feel proud and not embarrassed of my family. Because a younger Michelle would have judged that mom with the 2 daughters and no partner with her. My 18-year-old self would be very judgy. Um, Now in my early 50s, lot different story, much different story. Now I see a vision of, me and my girls, and I think I'm the one that's doing it. And we're going to do this together. We're going to depression, for example. It didn't just hit my brother Mark. It's in our family genes. So I can recognize, I can sniff out almost somebody with depression a mile away because I know the signs and I know the attitudes. And so there's a chance my daughters could have that challenge in their life. So I'm very observant to recognize and fight for them and make a better life for them. And for example, my youngest daughter, Justine, is now 10. She has spent the last 8 years in speech therapy. And she was just this calendar month released from speech therapy for the first time. She's set. But identification at 2 years old, when that child did not want to walk or talk, we had to intervene. As an adult, you have the opportunity to make things better. I had the opportunity then to get her into early child care, get her good doctors, work through the system. Eventually, I had a test done, a blood test done, and found out a diagnosis to her trisomy, which is a whole other conversation, I'm sure. But there's a challenge. I got to fix it. I got to find a way to pivot and take care of this because I don't want my daughter one day to take her life because of depression. I don't want my daughters one day to have an alcohol problem like their father. I want to ideally, I can't keep them from harm. I recognize that. And there's no crystal ball, but as an adult, you know, so I'm learning what skills work for me to try to pass on to them. And so many times when the girls say, can you help me with this? Can you do this for me? There's always an opportunity. Not every time. You don't want to be, too much on someone. But so many times there's that opportunity to say, okay, this is our problem. This stinks. Great. What are we going to do about this? And then we talk about it and we figure, okay, what are our options? Can we call the school and ask them a question? Can we call a dance class and see if this is right? How do we pivot in teaching them those skills is so key. So yes, I'm all about adulting.
Well, it's not taught in school, right? Like how to navigate life is not taught in school. And so as the parents and as the caregivers and caretakers, like it is up to us to become the best versions of ourselves so that we're in a position where we can be that for our kids. And that's like, as you were talking, like you came to this podcast because of the death of your brother and your spouse, and yet your parents divorced after 45 years. You had a divorce prior to your husband passing. Your spouse had been struggling with alcohol. Like your daughter has this diagnosis coincidentally at age 2. Like, did she have symptoms beforehand like that? The timing of it seems interesting to me as when this came out to be, you know, around her father passing, because by age 3 we've learned 75% of how to respond to life by age 3.
Oh my gosh. Justine, she's such she's such a good person. And she very early on, um, I was on maternity leave and she wouldn't quite look at me. I had a I had a very I feel like it took a long time to get her to be in that moment of being her mom. With Charlotte, it was instant love. It was, I'll take you to the moon and back. But with Justine, it was just a little different. Um, I didn't quite connect. I didn't quite get her. Um, and so fast forward her first 1 or 2 years, didn't want to talk, didn't make a lot of noises, very quiet. Um, didn't want to walk, did kind of a boot butt scuffle kind of maneuver. And knew something was up, knew something was a little different and had to figure out what maybe that was. And about the same time, we decided to move from Austin to Atlanta. So Justine is 6 months old. We move across the country. And that's really when things got interesting.
Mm.
But while my husband, while Justine we were realizing she needed early intervention, is really when my husband started to go off the rails.
Mm.
So I was managing being back in Atlanta, being close to family. My husband is spiraling. I haven't tapped my finger on that it's alcoholism, but he's different. And I have this beautiful 2-year-old that doesn't want to walk and does not have much to say. Um,
Plus another child.
and another child that is, ready for college, not 4. Um, she's
But
ready.
witnessing all this happening and being she's in it too, right?
She hears mom and dad talking in ways that were never, mom and dad didn't argue. Now we're arguing, we're in a different place. Her sisters, mom and dad are spending time on phone calls and doctor appointments for little sister. And, so it affected everybody. And, yeah, and kind of really fought for Justine. And many doctors at 2 wanted to chart her for autism. And having a couple of friends with autistic children, I didn't quite, I didn't buy it. I didn't agree with the doctors. So I kept finding other doctors. And someone finally listened. And she needed speech therapy. She needed physical therapy to teach her how to walk. And trisomy, it turns out years later, I found out what her diagnosis was. And very proud moment to get that diagnosis for her, to treat her the right way, to give her the skills that she needed. Not just a diagnosis on a form, to change the trajectory of her life of wasted opportunity. No. I argued with the doctors. I got sent out of offices. That's fine. In the end, she got her diagnosis. And it takes a little bit longer for her brain to be able to do the things that are so easy for so many of us. And so now at 10, she's now becoming an actual 10-year-old. Like all cylinders are firing and whatever that saying is, but yeah, adulting, going back to adulting for a moment and recognizing how I want things to be as good as they can be for my kids. And I think every parent really wants that. And it takes hard energy to push forward. And I think as an only parent, I just have that drive of, well, who else is going to clean the bathrooms? Who else is going to pay the bills? Who else? No, no.
Can I just applaud you for a moment?
Aw.
It takes courage to do what you've done. And be proud of yourself. And I hope you take stock of that at sometimes. And now you've written a book while
Yeah.
doing all of this.
Yes.
We don't celebrate ourselves enough. I'm guilty of it too, but we
Thank
just
you.
don't. We just don't. And so I'm just celebrating you in this moment.
I will accept that today. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
God. Whew. So, I mean, you've shared a lot about what grief has taught you, not without me asking even the direct question. I feel like you've really articulated what has, what you've gotten out of all that you've experienced, because it's not just the death of your brother and the death of your husband, it's all that stuff in between, um, that make us who we are. It's not just the one big thing and this other thing. It's cumulative. Um, how would you have described the Michelle before? And I don't even know which before you want to go with.
Mm.
The before your brother. I think that's a decision for you to make. Like when you felt yourself really, I'll say cocoon, and then come out a different way, the other side. How would you describe yourself before and after? And where is that distinction for you, you think?
Interesting question. Before and after. I feel like we live so many lives, or we have the opportunity to live lives. And I've probably mostly of my life been a half full kind of a girl, glass half full. But that shift, I feel like I didn't come into my own, if I'm being really honest, probably after I had both my girls. Um, I feel like I grew up in the right ways. And I'm stumbling here a little bit.
It's okay.
I think with Tracy, my husband's death, it's been such a few years day to day, hoping. But I feel like, yeah, ask me your question one more time. I'm so sorry.
How would you describe the Michelle before?
Mm.
Whatever experience you feel transitioned you the most into, so let's say, for example, maybe this will help. Like we all have these like defining moments or these moments in life where that's the day everything changed. That's the day where I was like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And whatever that was, who I was before and who I was after are not the same. Like
Yeah.
it was like exponential growth, exponential self awareness. And it takes action oftentimes, right? There's action in between there. And for me, it was grief recovery. Like I did grief recovery, went through that, and that changed my life. It changed my entire perspective of my past, helped me reframe my story,
Mhm.
the story I was holding on to, stories that weren't even mine that I was holding on to. Does that help? How would you describe the Michelle before and the Michelle after?
Thank you for that. I think there was a defining moment uh, on the floor of my kitchen. I had just lost my husband. He was in the hospital for 45 days.
Wow.
And one of those evenings, soon after, I had to make my kids dinner. And we had just moved into this house. I hadn't cooked a lot, I hadn't used the oven. And I sat there on the floor for far too long, trying to turn this machine on. And just with the girls having some movie blaring, I think it was Finding Nemo, and they were consumed. And I'm on the other side of the partition on the floor, staring at the oven, bawling, bawling. And I thought, okay, if I can turn this thing on, this is it. This is where the old Michelle of being selfish and going to concerts and doing what I want and having this life that I chose and being Michelle. This is where I'm a grown up. He's gone. I have to do this. I have to do this, and I can do this. And I sort of just pulled myself up, got the oven going, got dinner going, got him to bed, and moving forward, in time, I embraced my family and what it looked like with the three of us. Because in the long term, we were going to be a family far longer than that short blurb of time that we dated and had babies. We had so much more to do. And the picture on the cover of the book is so defining of that moment that we were newly by ourselves, the three of us. And that was maybe my defining pivot of a stronger Michelle. I've become a lot stronger, more confident, more flexible, and a lot more honest. And I hope that those are all attributes that the girls are witnessing. And that one day when they're in their 30s and they're comprehending more and more and doing more, and that ideally they can look back and think, mom did right by us. She taught us the best she could.
You forgot one attribute: patience.
Don't we need so much patience? And maybe COVID taught us that. COVID was an amazing equalizer in so many ways, and that's a whole other conversation. But Um, Patience. You have to have patience.
One thing we haven't really talked about, I kind of touched on it earlier, but we didn't really go there in the conversation. And I feel it's important from your perspective as an only parent and the circumstances that brought you to only parenting. But self care,
Mm,
what does that look like for you?
self-care. Whew, for a long time, when I was writing my book, um, eating well, I've always slept well. Can't complain there. Um, but while I was writing my book, I did teach myself, sometimes by watching videos on YouTube, um, but also taught myself to sit in the quiet, meaning I'm not a big TV person. I might have my radio on, but I'm not a big TV person. I get the girls to bed at a certain hour, and then I'd have a block of, 2 to 4 hours of Michelle time. And that would be my self-care opportunity. And sometimes I would do yoga and watch yoga videos, or I'd listen to grief talks. I wanted to hear who had it worse, who had it harder. If it wasn't real, I could not relate. Um, and so self-care has taken different forms over the years. And more recently, it's walking. It's it's always dancing. We always have little dance parties in our house. Um, and then even more recently, Victoria, I would say as recent as the past 3 months, I am having to remind myself to be Michelle, not the widow, not the only parent, not the flexible person at work that, helps people get things done. It's me and Michelle. And self-care is hard. It's hard for me to be nice to myself. I don't always eat great. I don't walk every day. That's a hard, it's hard to take care of myself.
When do you feel the most like yourself? When do you feel the most like at home within yourself? What are you doing when you're feeling the most like yourself?
Probably when I'm being creative. For a few years it was the book. Other times it's collaging, maybe painting, maybe writing, but doing something creative and listening to music, and yes, having that quiet time.
So, are you doing more of that?
I will start.
I think you found your solution for self care.
Self-care. It's so hard. It's
That
so
can be
hard.
your self care, right? Like, people think like self care is like bubble baths and pampering and getting your nails done and hair and da 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 da. And like, no, sometimes it can be just doing what brings you joy.
Right.
That's simplicity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, that's my goal this year. And it's not to be corny. Oh, it's January and, spring is around the corner and, it'll be here before we know it. It's a true need for me to put on the oxygen mask. When you're on the airplane, what do they always say? Take care of yourself first and then the person next to you. and it's hard to keep that oxygen tank on. And as recent as this morning, I logged into work. I work remote, logged in, and I thought, no, I can't juggle today. I don't want to focus X amount of time on this and then have this great opportunity to talk with you. I need boundaries. And I'm just now learning to say, no, I'm actually going to not work today. I'm not going to put my energy towards this. I'm going to focus on myself today and focus on telling our story. And it took me a couple hours this morning to just decompress, get the girls to school, do the thing, be myself. And I'm really trying. I'm really going to keep trying to sometimes say no. I have to just be Michelle.
There's a really good book that, after I went through grief recovery, I learned that I didn't know boundaries. I didn't recognize other people's boundaries. And we don't. Like, if we don't have boundaries ourselves, we don't recognize other people's boundaries. That's where we get offended and feel like someone did something to us, because that's why we're uncomfortable with other people's boundaries. If that's your indicator that you don't have boundaries yourself, is if you're upset by someone else's boundaries, there's your sign. But it's the book is called Boundaries by
Mm,
Dr. Townsend, and there's another doctor. It's a really
okay.
great book. I'll put the link in the show notes. Um, but that covers all aspects of life, really. There's a little bit of a Christian spin on it, but not heavily. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's a really good book. Um, I got one final question that I jotted down here. Can you speak to the difficulty, or maybe not, of friendships? First of all, friendships are tough as an adult, but as an only parent, as a widow, um, and then I'm also curious if you've dated or tried dating and what that's like.
Mm. Ooh, dating. Dating. Friendships and dating. So let's talk about this. Um, Friendships is one of the reasons that I began my book. I started writing letters to Suzanne, and it was a way to Suzanne, let me talk about her for a real quick moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
She's a fiery little firecracker. She is in Austin, Texas. She has a great husband and family. And we worked together for close to 20 years. Two different companies, but we always worked together. So we were work spouses forever until I moved back to Atlanta as an adult. And so when Tracy died and I was writing to Suzanne because she knew everything about me. She knew my coffee order. She knew how much I slept. She knew what I did the night before. She knew it all. And so my friendship with Suzanne was mission critical. And she and Zeb and other friendships just saved me. Um, the past couple years, I've been very close with some girlfriends named Sophia and Kelly, and I've known Sophia since high school. And the three of us joke that we're like the Golden Girls already because, we check in. I check in with them daily. They check in with me. They bug me if I'm eating okay. Friendships have become so important. Um, and they're so valuable. They keep me going. I need my friendships. I need my girl team. I have some guy friends, but funny, Most women don't want a widow chit-chatting with their husband. So, don't get quite invited to maybe all the parties or all the dinners or, I've learned that over the years. So,
Do you know any other widows?
I do, and not very close with them. Very different experiences. I feel like I've moved forward with understanding my relationship with Tracy is over. He's gone. But some widows that I know, the few widows I know, are honestly really uh, still connected to those husbands and almost still speak of them in the present. And I'm just not that way. So it's a little hard for me to connect.
And maybe more connected to the word widow.
Mm,
Do they also have children?
yes. Older children. Yeah.
I was just
Um,
thinking, it's like, well, I thought you could create Michelle's Widow Club. You could have
yeah.
your own club.
Yeah. I believe it. I believe it. Yeah. So friendships are key. But when it comes to dating, a couple funny stories. It's been 8 years. And so I've had ebbs and flows of dating. At the beginning, it was, you know, no interest, please. That was the last thing. Um, but then during COVID, a couple years in, just thought it was, worth trying to date. So I got on some of those apps um, and it was just miserable. It was like people like me, in their mid 40s and been married once or twice and had the kids. And I thought, oh God, I don't want other kids. I don't want, it just, there's so many thought collisions of dating in your 40s and definitely had some fun and had some good first and last dates. Met a wonderful man at the end of COVID and we dated for a year. Very different experience, different feelings of feeling selfish for getting sitters and going on dates and leaving the girls and so much guilt. And then, combated with, the yin and the yang of, but you have to be Michelle, you have to get out there, you need to do this, you need to do this. And I put all this pressure to be dating and found a nice guy and we dated a year and we had just had the holidays together and he caught COVID and about 2 weeks passed by and he calls me. It's like, Michelle, um, I've been sick with COVID. I haven't heard from you. And you know what? I honestly forgot. I'm so busy with work and life and my daughters that the moment we had a little bit of a break, and in that moment, I thought, oh my God, we need to break up, first of all. And second of all, I don't need this. Right now in my life, my priority is getting the mask on my mouth and raising two good kids. And, I'm good with that. It's not a lazy thing. It's not because, I've lost myself. I feel cute. I feel good. But right now, it's not a priority. Now, if we talk and my girls are out of the house down the road and, I deserve another big love. I know I do. And that better happen for me in the future, right? But for now, it is just not, we are such a good team, the three of us, that I feel like it needs to stay that way for them.
It's a great answer. And I think, if or when it's meant to be, it'll bump into you when you least expect it. Because
Right.
that's the best, is when it's unexpected,
One day.
when
One
the
day.
stars align.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no doubt the more you lean into being Michelle, that someday that will happen. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you didn't feel you got to?
One thing comes to mind. In my book, I created a Venn diagram. And on one side, it's your former life. And on one side, it's your new reality. Whether you were divorced or you lost a parent in your, it's your former life, and then you have a new reality. I had a real conversation with my husband one day. It was a Saturday, and I had an intervention with him. And it was a big, long day, 12 hours. We had the intervention. And it was very spontaneous, but it worked out great. And he agreed to go and seek treatment for his alcoholism. And he had one caveat to that. And it was the next day was Super Bowl Sunday. And he didn't want to miss a Super Bowl Sunday. So I said, okay, they'll be open Monday at 8. We're going. And we did. But things happened and he landed in the hospital. It's a whole big story. But he had a fall in treatment on day 1 and he landed in the hospital. And that was a new reality for me. And when he passed, it was a new reality. But that's not where I'm at. That's just things that are happening. But for me, in the middle of the Venn diagram is creating your new normal. And I think that has been a beneficial visual for me because each day we can have the opportunity to create a new normal. We lost love. We lost a person. But I just want people to know that you can move on and you can have great joy. So I really appreciate you having me today. Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome. But now I have a follow-up question.
Oh,
Because that adds another layer to the experience in that, and because you brought it up, this is why I'm asking. So was it the fall? Did he hit his head? And that the fall took his life? Like, like,
well, what seems to have happened is that he was, I learned, self-detoxing himself off of alcohol the last couple of weeks of his life. And so for anyone listening that's not familiar with alcoholism, as I was not, when you rip the Band-Aid and take alcohol away from someone that's used to having it in their body, their heart is like their liver. It remembers all this alcohol. The liver remembers all of this. So when you strip the alcohol away and you stop drinking about a week or 2, So when he went to treatment, he hadn't been drinking. His body was revolting. His eyes on the drive there were like yellow glowing. And I looked at him and I said, I remember we didn't even actually leave the driveway. We got in the car and I said, Tracy, I've never seen your eyes so yellow. And I remember him looking in the visor, and then we went to treatment. So what I think happened that day is his agitation, his lack of alcohol, his liver was already gone. So it was, I think, accumulation of all this happening in his body. And I think he had a fall, and that's what prompted them to take him to the hospital. I think he was agitated. I think there may have been a scuffle, but he landed in the hospital. But by then it wasn't because he had a fight. It wasn't because of I think it was really because his body was deteriorating. So he was there 45 days, and after about 2 weeks, he, what I call, went underwater. He was gone. And so the last few weeks was, realizing what was happening, and his body was starting to fail more, and it was just going to get worse. And so, yeah, I think he was in the hospital 2.5 weeks or so when this internist, Stacy, came in the room to ask if she could talk to me. And so we went to this room. There was another doctor, a third party, and they were telling me all this information about Tracy. And I'm realizing it's like someone else, it was an out-of-body experience. And I remember sitting there thinking, he's gonna die. No, he's going to get treatment. This isn't what's gonna, no, that's not going to happen. They're like, no, he cannot, his body will not survive this. His body will not. The liver was gone. So for someone that's an alcoholic, they're not a liver transplant candidate, and his body wore out. He was 45.
For me, it just is heartbreaking. Because he went to get help, right?
He went to get help, and he loved those two girls like no one's business. He would let them mark him up with all sorts of markers and paint on him and crawl all over him. I mean, he was such a good dad. Such a good dad.
Do the girls know that? Do the girls know that he was struggling and that he went to get help?
No, their understanding of dad is that he had a lot of grown-up drinks. Now they know it as alcohol. They know it as a beer. They can call it a wine, but at the time. So in growing up, I've never been a big drinker. So if I did have something over the years that the girls would see, if I'd have a glass of wine, it wasn't going to be the whole bottle. It was just going to be that glass. And they would ask me from time to time, Mommy, is that a grown-up drink? Mommy, are you allowed to have, they became conscious of it. And but even now, Justine has so faint memories of him. And Charlotte has more, a lot of good memories, all good with him. Um, and you know, it's an ebb and flow of how much we talk about their dad. In the beginning, I was very conscious of, oh, your dad would be so proud. Oh my gosh, you know, if your dad saw this, he would love this picture, you know, and that kind of weaned over the years. And he comes up naturally now. But I do suspect that um, more questions will come. You know, when the book came out, Charlotte asked if she could read it. I said, you know, not yet. It's a grown-up book. So down the road when you're older, yes, I'm sure there will be a time you will read it. And I had that in mind when I wrote, you know, I wanted to be respectful of him in the book, but also from my honest point of view of what was happening. And so to go back maybe to the Venn diagram, in the middle is creating your new normal. And I think for myself and our family, time, it takes time to create your new normal. We have to give it time.
Yeah, but you've done a lot, taken a lot of action in that time. It's not just idly waiting for time to pass, and time heals all wounds, which is a myth, right? It's the action that you've taken in that time,
Mm.
the choices, the decisions that you've made for yourself, for your daughters. It's not just passively living life, it's actively pursuing life in the quest of a new normal.
In the quest of a new normal. That's so true. Because for people like my brother Mark, who lived his 52 years on this earth, with most of those years so painful with the voices in his head and the depression, and seeing that so many people live that way, not out of choice, but I want to give the girls the most out of life that I can give them. And honestly, I want that for myself. And, you know, for anyone listening, write. I'm not saying write a book. I'm not saying you're going to write the next great poem. You know, make a list. Make a grocery list. Make a list of things you want to do this weekend. Make a list of 4 things you want to get done this year. And if you can put it out there, I really do believe that you will receive. Like, for example, I wrote on a board over here a couple of things that I wanted, family goals. And one was take my kid to a particular concert. We got the tickets for that in June. We're very excited. And we wanted to go to DC this year. And we're going to work towards that. And it's, you know, have goals. Have something to look forward to.
Good advice. That's self-care too, right? Something to look forward to.
It is.
Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, find the book, all of those things?
Oh, thank you. The book title, Hold Back the Rain, is the same as my webpage. And you'll find some more about me, find out some more. But honestly, you can get the book at Barnes & Noble online, Amazon online, maybe a couple other sources are on my website, but
link to that in the show notes.
so yeah, so
How about on social? On social media?
Social, I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
And so if you seek out Hold Back the Rain, I'm sure you can find it. There'll be a click on my site.
I'll put links, direct links to those on to your social media also in the show notes. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
thank you so much for this lovely conversation today. I always get so much out of these conversations, and I hope likewise you received something too.
Yes, yes. Time and experience. And I thank you for yours.
You're welcome. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.